sir. Yes, sir. Unc and Few in the building. A little change of location for the nephew right now, but Unc, how you doing, man? Welcome. Good morning to everybody, man. How you doing, Unc?
Dude, man, I don't know if you guys have
Mm.
got this yet over by your parts, man, but we just got buried with about 18 inches of snow over the last 48 hours. I've been
What?
shoveling like a mother. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I know. That's what my other friend from around you said. He's like, oh, just a dusting over here, man. And I'm like, yeah, we got spanked with a foot and a half. So I've been like doing a fair bit of shoveling, man. I feel like it's been back day at the gym 2 days in a row, man. so, so yeah, little change of scenery around here, man. It's looking like a winter wonderland at the moment.
Man. You know what's crazy, man? Right where we are, where I'm in Ottawa right now, right? We are not experiencing barely any snow, but then you look at other parts of Canada, they are drenched, man. They're going centimeters for days, especially the West Coast, in like the Perry's area, man. Like, goddamn, you know what I mean?
Well,
Crazy.
in this particular region where I'm at, we're right smack in the lee of the Great Lakes, right? So there's a definite lake effect
Mm,
thing, right? The same thing that's going to smack down Buffalo tonight is affecting us
yeah,
here, right? So yeah.
that's a fact. By the way, shout out to CJ Boom in the chat. He came early or maybe on time. Apologies, I got us a little bit late, but
Yeah,
appreciate CJ
dude.
Boom in the chat. You know what I mean? And as always, the best way to support us is liking the stream, people. Like the stream, share, with your auntie, your cousin, whoever you have around you, man. Best way to
That's
support
it, man.
us and the movement, man. And we might have some announcements in a bit. So y'all stay tuned. Y'all stay tuned. If you're a fan of Uncle Few, we got some very, very special announcements. And there's no way I can start this off without giving, most of my US audience, well, most of my audience, in all honesty, a happy Thanksgiving, y'all.
Yes,
Happy
man.
Thanksgiving to everybody watching, man, or people who
Yeah.
celebrate in the United States. Unc, any words for them?
Oh yeah, man. I have lots of friends in the United States as a result of my years down there. So and yeah,
Mm,
I've developed a particular love of American Thanksgivings. It's probably one of my favorite holidays, even though it's not an
yeah.
official one up here. Truth be
Mhm.
told, man, long before I went down to the States, me and my crew would always book off work on 2 days of the
Mm,
year, right?
nice.
Minimum one would be for the first day or two of the NCAA tournament, but the other was always Thanksgiving Day. Man, we'd always have a Thanksgiving
Mm,
Day party. Me and my football friends, right? Because it's
what's
frig,
up?
man. We would book that Thursday off work. Probably the Friday too, right? So we would do it up in the American style up here, just because we were lovers of football, right? Which is a big part of that tradition down there. So when I moved down to the States, I was like in hog heaven, right? It was just amazing to be a part of that whole darn tradition. So yeah, it's always been a big thing for me. Sometimes I cook for the day, sometimes I don't. But the idea that I'm going to be sitting down, watching
Mm,
football,
yes, sir.
enjoying that American tradition, remembering fondly my time down there over that holiday. Absolutely. Yeah. It's been a long tradition with me to sit down and enjoy all the football that is the Turkey Day celebrations down in the United States.
Definitely. And somebody whose turkey is cooked is Matt Eberflus. Let's get into it, brother. His turkey is definitely cooked. In other words, this man was fired on his semi day off on Friday. Shout out to Craig and Smokey.
Why didn't it happen
Um,
sooner is the only question we can really ask.
well, that's why. And you know what it was? I think it was because they thought that Caleb Williams could save him. They thought that Justin Fields was the problem. The
I
problem
guess,
is
yeah.
your stank head
That,
coach who does not know how to time manage and important. They should have. I'm gonna say it. The Bears should have won that game. They
that
should
is
have
an
won that game. They
interesting.
had every position to win that game.
That's
Talk to us.
that
Why did the
that
Lions? You go ahead.
No, all I was just going to say, I was just going to interject to say that that's a really cogent analysis of the Justin Fields situation. Is that yeah, they were going to blame all of that excuse me, on Justin Fields, and carry on with Eberflus. But I mean, what you saw in that game against Detroit at the ending down there, I mean, my goodness, you couldn't have, if you were a Hollywood writer who was writing up the Eberflus failure narrative, you couldn't have scripted it any better, right? You know,
Yeah.
messing up with on simple basic time management. They had every opportunity to at least tie that game up. And instead they just limped out of there with a W. Now everybody expected them to get the W, but they
Mhm.
were playing really, really well. They were rallying against Detroit in a game in which they were like double digit underdogs, I think, or maybe it dipped
Oh
under
yeah.
10 by game time. But yeah, they were expected to get, I mean, and then there were a lot of people that were calling for Detroit to absolutely blow them out, being at home on Thanksgiving Day after having
Hmm.
suffered decades of humiliations on Thanksgiving Day on national
Yes,
television, right?
actually a lot. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I would not have been shocked to see another like 41-10 type of game against the Bears the way they've been playing of late. But instead, the Bears
Hmm.
showed us some defense, right? A lot of
Yes,
people should
they
be
did.
studying that Chicago defense film against
Yes,
Detroit
they did.
if they want to figure out how to
Mhm.
beat Detroit. So, anyways, yeah, and Eberflus just screwed it all up. Seriously, that
Right.
was absolute mismanagement. That was clock malpractice, and they paid the price for it.
Oh. And on top of that, what's really interesting is the fact that we have we have been dogging this guy, but we gotta give him credit where it's due. Caleb Williams was balling, especially in the second half. He was throwing darts, on time throws. He was really on point. And the difference again was the coaching, man. You could
Yeah,
see Dan Campbell was dialed in. He knew what to do. And Eberflus, he did not know what to do, and he got fired right after because there's so
yeah,
many 1.1 possession games that the Chicago Bears have lost this season, and it comes down to coaching, brother. And that's the difference between a good coach, a trash coach, and a mid coach. And I'm happy Chicago fans don't have to deal with Eberflus no more. But let me tell you this: the Dallas Cowboy fans have to deal with Mike McCarthy, bro. Because what is going on right now, G? You have the
well,
Dallas Cowboys all of a sudden going on a 2 game run. You know what I mean? We're gonna talk about that ending versus the Washington Commanders in a bit. But the Giants rally 27-20, and it was not this close. What did you think? That Rico Dowdle Cooper Rush combo. What is going on in Dallas, bro?
all of a sudden, Cooper Rush looks really confident at quarterback. It's kind of amusing, right? And hey, CeeDee
Hmm.
Lamb called it 2 weeks ago. He was like, don't be so quick to judge Cooper Rush, he said. The guy can throw the ball. And he sure looked like it. That was a fun game to watch, man.
Right.
Except for the Giants. The Giants were terrible, man. The Giants. Let me give you some of the numbers on the Giants. Right, the
Yeah.
penalties, their offensive line. I mean, turnovers, you name it. They were terrible at it.
Everything.
So, yeah. So, I mean, Dallas should have won by at least another touchdown, to be quite honest with you. That they only won by
Yeah.
7 is testament to the troubles that Dallas is having this year. But,
Hmm.
give Dallas credit. Give Dallas credit. They played a balanced game. Cooper Rush was excellent. He had no turnovers.
Not at all. No.
You know what I mean? And that crazy game that we saw with Washington the week before, right? That was
Oh
just
man.
insanity. But the thing is, though, the point to take a look. Remember, we've said many times on this show that an NFL season is often not unlike an NFL game. Sometimes when
Right.
you start off like really behind the 8 ball in the first half, you often rally and regress in the second half. So you were down 21-0 at the half, and somehow you come back and just, you claw your way back into it. And all of a sudden it's like, a 28-27 game or something crazy like that. That happens a lot, right? But it also happens in a season. Right? Anybody objectively saying that Dallas should be 2-9, as much as we tee off on Dallas, there's still
Mhm.
enough talent in that room, especially if you assume Dak Prescott was going to play the entire season. There's no way
Oh
you would assume them to be 2-9 or whatnot. So we've talked about this before, where if you look at how many games they have left, I'll bet you any money Dallas wins at least half of them, if not, four out of goes 4-2 or something. Well, that means a few teams are going to go down that you wouldn't expect to against this Dallas squad. But this Dallas squad over the last half of the season is probably going to look much better than it did in the first. And that's because Cooper Rush is getting comfortable and Dowdle is starting to do what he's supposed to do. Again, we talk about teams that don't play their bell cow running backs. That's been the
Yeah.
case with Dowdle. And we've seen in the last two games what happens with Dallas when they just pound Dowdle.
And to top it off, like you said, man, we gotta give props to this man on the screen right now. And we knew Sleepy Euphoria would come in the chat. You already know it was gonna come for his boys. He's in the chat, yes, sir. From the Stairmaster. Shout out to Sleepy. He's in the gym right now watching us. He's saying they're going to the Super Bowl. See, this is the
Who's
delusion
that
of
now?
Cowboy fans. This is the
Who's
insane.
going to the Super Bowl? Dallas?
That's what he's saying, man. That's what this insane Cowboy
Yeah.
fan is saying in the chat. Look at this guy, man. This is why we hate y'all cowgirl fans. This is why you go on a
Hold
two-game
on.
winning streak, and now you're talking about the
You
bowl.
you keep you keep crushing on those guys. I gotta adjust my lighting here in the studio for just a second.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No problem, man. I'm telling y'all right now, there's not necessarily a path to the Super Bowl. There's a path to potentially the playoffs because the Dallas Cowboys have the Bengals, and we know how bad that Bengals defense is. The Cowboys have the Panthers. That's a winnable game. The Buccaneers, surprisingly winnable, especially if Deron Blanc keeps doing what he's
Listen,
doing. The Eagles, they're gonna lose and the Washington Commanders on January 5th. So we're looking at a scenario. Dallas could go 4-1, right? And their record could be, sounds crazy, 11 and how much is it? No, sorry, 9 wins. And at this point, how many losses would they have?
so
They'd
that'd be
have
nine
eight,
and
nine and
seven or
eight,
9-8.
nine, 9-8. Actually, that's exactly. And if Parsons keeps doing what he's doing, and Dallas does what they did versus the Commanders, let's talk about it, Unc. We need to have a separate talk about it. How did you feel about that? That ending.
Like that game was insane. That game really was insane. I mean,
Mm,
again with Cooper Rush, right? He was 24 for 32, 247 yards, 2 TDs, 0 picks, right? That's
yes.
huge. Like that's a pro NFL line right there. Jaden Daniels was a little less efficient, right? You can see his numbers. 25 for 38 for 275, 2 TDs, but 2 picks. Um, and also, too, this is the first game in a while he's had to add a good number of yards on the ground because the running game
Mm,
wasn't really working for them. Robinson's sort of injured. And Eckler, I believe, had to exit with a concussion, I think it was. But
yeah.
anyways,
Sounds
yeah,
about.
so not everything was working for DC. And that's a trend we've been seeing over the last month with DC, right? Ever since Jaden Daniels took that rib injury, the fact that he ran so much indicates that perhaps he's feeling a little bit better in the ribs. But nevertheless, the team as a whole has regressed a little bit. It was kind of surprising at that point when they were, I believe, 7-2. A lot of people. It's not that people were so surprised with the offense; they were surprised to see just exactly how much the defense had been responding to what the offense was doing. And we're seeing a natural regression in that regard. So the Commanders are not as fearsome on defense, so they're allowing a bit more points. And boy, did we ever see that in the fourth quarter of that game, right? It
My
was
God.
just crazy. Like, and also too the variety and the number of plays, man. Like that whole game went Madden in
Crazy.
the last quarter, right? We had like an onside kick return for a touchdown. 45 years of watching football, I ain't never seen that, right?
Never seen that. Never
Never,
seen that.
never seen that. And then there was like another fumble or another turnover in there. Like it was wild. They scored a game's worth of points in the fourth quarter, both teams.
Whole
But
thing.
sadly, it wasn't enough for DC though. It wasn't enough for DC.
No.
All of a sudden, DC has questions on defense, and Dallas looks like they're finally answering a little bit of their questions on both offense and defense.
And I will tell you this, man. It starts with the head, man. The head is Micah Parsons. And I'm tell you something, man. Parsons, these last two games, has been playing every bit of amazing D and linebacker. And he
Uh,
has rallied this team. Deron Bland has came back from injury. I think Deron Bland is actually better than Trayvon Diggs. This Cowboys team is a very tough team to beat right now when their defense is dialed in. Because remember,
yeah.
last year they had a phenomenal defense,
Yes.
and that
And
helped them win 12 games. That's what
And
I
we've
think
been
also.
wondering where it's been all year long. And like I said, man, teams
Yeah,
regress in the second half of the season, often how they
yes.
do in a game. Right. So it's kind of fascinating to watch all this. It's, yeah. So Dallas will not be an easy out over the back end of the season. And we saw that. We saw that. With the way that they locked down the Giants and also the way they rallied against the Commanders. And lest anybody forget, both those games are in their division. So those wins are very important to them.
Ouch. Huge with divisional games. And let me tell you something, at least they're not as sorry as this Miami team
Oh,
versus
my
the
goodness.
Packers. What is wrong with Tua and that entire offense when they play in the cold, brother? Please
Well,
explain this because I've heard that this has always been Miami's thing. Miami
it
has
is.
always
Yep.
underperformed in the cold, 30 to 17.
Miami.
I'd say the Packers are a very, very
Yeah.
good team that somehow might miss the playoffs. I know it sounds crazy. They are 9-3 and might miss on the playoffs. I know it sounds wild, but they've
I,
spanked on the Miami Dolphins, who are on a little win streak. Unc, what do you think about that?
well, the only game I can ever think of in the snow where the Dolphins came out on top was like that Thanksgiving Day game back in 93 or 94, whatever it was, with Leon Lett. Leon Lett mistakenly touched a ball after a kickoff that he should have just laid dead, but instead he touched it, mishandled it, and like the Dolphins recovered it in the end zone or something for a TD. It was a huge embarrassment. But other than that, like Miami has been reliably terrible in the month of December and cold weather games in general for a long time. They just are, man. Like Michael Irvin described it last year before Miami went to, I believe it was KC last year in
Kansas
a
City
game
in the
that was
playoffs,
in
yeah.
brutal conditions, 30 below zero and
Right,
all that
cold.
stuff. And Michael Irvin said, like, look, dude, like you can't understand it unless you live it, right? It's one of those who feels it knows it situations, right? He's like, look, man, you left the practice field on Thursday for a Sunday game or Friday. You know, you went to the Starbucks in your shorts and all that stuff. You climb on the plane and you pad up, you put on your winter clothes because you've seen the weather report. But like when you step off that plane and you step outside in KC and all of a sudden it's 30 friggin' below zero with the wind chill and all that stuff and it's a really strong wind. Like it's just different. It's disheartening. It discourages you. Now,
Yes.
Miami didn't even have it that bad up there in Green Bay. There wasn't a ton of snow and all that stuff. It was just a bit cold, right? It was probably 5 below or something like that Celsius. I think it was 26 degrees at game time. So, yeah, it wasn't really terrible, but it took them out of their wheelhouse. But more than that, like I don't know what it was. I mean, the real statistic that I saw was that their run game was shut down. Achan all of a sudden couldn't
Destroyed.
run for love nor money. Mostert ran for
Yeah.
like 20 yards and led the team or something like that. But as a team, Miami
Hmm.
only ran for like less than 60 yards, I think, some number like that. Because
Wow.
Tua, whatever you want to say about Tua actually had a pretty good line here. He was 37 for 46, 365 yards, two TDs, and zero picks. Don't blame this game
No.
on Tua. Tua did
No.
everything Tua did everything you could ask of him. He spread the ball all over the place. Jonu Smith performed, but the reality is that like Green Bay was up substantially. I think it was 27-11 with like less than
Yeah.
8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So like the game was well out of their reach. For all that passing around the field, they weren't really getting a lot of points. So it was kind of an inefficient performance by the Miami offense.
Hmm.
And their defense, which has been fairly good of late, didn't have an answer for Jordy Love, who had a very efficient night, 21 for 28,
No.
275, two TDs. Yeah. So good night for him. And for the Green Bay offense, they were very efficient.
And I'm telling you right now, man, I titled this stream "Return of the Running Back" because again,
Hmm.
we talk about Saquon a lot. We talk about Henry a lot. We gotta have a
Hmm.
conversation about this man. This man single-handedly destroyed the Miami defense. What am I
Yeah.
talking about? I'm saying that the man, Josh Jacobs, 19 carries, 43 yards, not a lot,
I was
one
going to
touchdown,
say he didn't
but
put up a lot of rushing yards.
he got used in the passing game though. 4 catches, 74 yards.
Nice. Right.
That's what the running back can do to your offense. They also commit to the run in Green Bay. So you had a game last week where Josh Jacobs had like three rushing touchdowns, like some 150 yards, and I was playing
Hmm.
Sleepy in fantasy. And guess who Sleepy Euphoria had in fantasy? Josh Jacobs, and I got annihilated. So long story short, the return of the running back is a real thing, y'all. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm telling you, either you're gonna have you use your running back in good packages and make it work, or you put him in the passing game and make it work. And if you have an elite guy like Josh Jacobs, you can go very, very far. Any last words about that game, Unc, in Miami?
No, just sort of like the perfect game out of Green Bay. So, and it was the game they needed,
Mm,
man. Like they had no room for error on that one. And yeah,
wow.
so we've seen Miami's defense return with tags, and this game was no exception, except that it didn't really find the end zone. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And we got to touch on this, man. How do they keep getting away with this, Unc? How do these BA I'm not gonna use curse words. How do these damn Chiefs have everything work in their favor? They are the anti Chicago Bears. You see the Chicago Bears? The Chicago Bears find
Yeah.
ways to lose in the end. The Kansas City Chiefs have God, Vishnu, whoever you believe in on their side for Aiden O'Connell to miss the snap and end the game on a game losing snap. How the hell did it happen? Unc, talk to us. Have you seen this in your football fan career where everything goes right for one team and they just
A little bit with the Patriots, but it usually had something to do with the refs. Um, to be honest with you.
yeah.
The Chiefs just have a remarkable ability to just sort of stay calm and I don't know somehow turn an oblong football into something round. Anyway, so yeah, we've seen a lot of fluky stuff, and who knows when it runs out. But let me tell you this, buddy, they were favored by I think it was 13 and a half points or some crazy number, and
Yes, they were. Yes, they
yeah,
were.
yeah, dude. I had the Raiders, man. I had the Raiders. They've this is
Raiders
again
are
one of those
crazy.
AFC West games, and I said that number's way too big. Especially how the Raiders are the closest thing to they're the closest thing to a team that actually has KC's number because I think they beat them
They
last
do.
fall too, right? And
Yes,
they
they
played
did.
them fairly close this year, given the relative failures that LA or Las Vegas has had this year. Like it's not been a good franchise, but yet somehow they're always up for the Chiefs. So yeah, man,
Yeah.
I had the Las Vegas Raiders to cover that.
And I'm telling you, that's a fantastic bet you would have made because, like I said, do you see how the Bears were supposed to win that game versus
Mhm.
I'm blanking out.
I
The
should have
Bears were
taken the
supposed
Bears, and I should have taken the
yeah.
Bears there too. This was the week where the double digit point
Mm.
spread just didn't work, and yeah, but
No, the
no
point spread.
nobody could have seen the
Mm.
Bears covering that game. To be honest with you, I mean, not rationally,
Uh, The
not
craziest
after
part
what's
is
happened
I think
recently.
that's a fact. It's same thing with the Raiders. The Raiders should have won that game. They were controlling the
Yeah,
flow of the game. And let me tell you this,
Aiden
you know what I mean?
O'Connell is the next guy who's figured out how to play quarterback all of a sudden, like Cooper
Like
Rush.
what? What's going on? Aiden O'Connell coming straight off the bench for an
I mean,
injured Minshew and really balling out. You have a situation here where this game was in the Raiders' hands to lose, and they found a way to lose. Credit to the Chiefs. I hate them, but credit to the Chiefs for finding crazy, insane ways to win.
Yeah.
And that's what you need from your guys to at least give some kind of hope. You know they're drafting number one. They're drafting number one or two. They're gonna get Travis Hunter or Shador. But guess what? They showed something that a lot of teams don't show against KC. They showed a lot of heart. Okay? When we're talking
Yeah.
about heart, that's what you need to play against the Chiefs. You have to play them hard and aggressive until the very end, the last whistle. Because they're
Listen,
gonna be
man.
in it straight up.
Listen, man. Listen. After what
Mm.
we've seen happening this year, with some of these quarterbacks, these rookies coming around at this point, but also some of the guys who we've written off as complete failures are starting to show some progress. And lo and behold, it's been 2 or 3 years in the league, and guys like Aiden O'Connell, guys like Cooper Rush. I mean, after performances like that, I do not understand how you do not give these guys chances. Now, of course, Dak's
Oh
going to come
yes.
back next year and whatnot, but who knows? Maybe they trade Dak off and get some value at quarterback so they can go out and get themselves, some talent on the offensive line or something like that. But like
Right.
this
Brilliant.
fascination with this rotating carousel, this turnstile of rookie quarterbacks that you keep drafting, like stop it and focus and pay attention to the guys you already have. Because I bet you 7 times out of 10, you have the talent you need. But we
Mm.
keep talking about nurturing these quarterbacks, and Aiden O'Connell has shown us with that performance. Like, because I remember he's going up against Spagnuolo's defense, right? This guy
Yeah.
managed to complete a lot of quality passes. He had a good day at the yard.
And shout out to my boy Brock Bowers. I'm gonna win a lot of games because I drafted him. I saw something. I saw something.
And Jacoby Myers,
But
huh? Look at how Jacoby Myers now that
Jacoby Myers too.
with
Yep.
Devontae out of
Yep.
there, right? Jacoby Myers, who's been a stalwart wide receiver too for quite a while. Now he's getting the chance to get all the numbers, and he's corralling them
Hmm.
all. Jacoby Myers is an underrated talent.
That's something we're gonna talk about probably in our starts and sits for future reference as we prep for the playoffs. But whoever has this guy in their team, their lineup, they're doing very well.
Yeah,
They're winning a lot of matchups, namely the Rams versus the Eagles. We saw that Sunday Night Football last week. Saquon Barkley with a legendary 255 yards on
historic.
26 carries, 2 touchdowns. He had like maybe 60 something more in the air. Saquon
Yeah.
Barkley, brother. Let's talk about this, brother. I'm scared tonight. We got my Ravens facing them. I'm shook. Okay, Unc, talk to us.
It's going to be a great game. Yeah, man.
Fantastic.
Well, we talked about how the running back game has evolved in 2024 and probably has been evolving for about 2 or 3 years now.
Mhm.
And we're talking about how some of the linebackers are, a little smaller but very speedy and all that type of thing. So it allows running backs linebackers to exercise a lot of gap discipline with their speed and get after the quarterback. But while they've been so busy getting after the quarterback, they've kind of been forgetting about the running back. And when you
Right.
get a running back as talented as Saquon Barkley running downhill at you, and there's a linebacker size imbalance, this is just part of the to and fro of the NFL as it goes back and forth over the years, as the offenses and defenses play, cops and robbers, police and thieves, right? So,
Hmm.
it's always point counterpoint, right? And so right now we're at an inflection point in the NFL where the running backs, some of these running backs are there's an imbalance versus the linebackers that they're going up against. And for a guy like Saquon Barkley, this is outstanding. And it also is a product of the marketplace, right? Look at how cheap he was to
Right.
get. Couple that with
Yes,
the
he was.
imbalance on the lines, like we're talking about, and you're getting a lot of production for $10 million. I think it is for Saquon Barkley on average. Now, this guy
Something like
gave
that.
you 245 yards rushing, 9.8 yards a carry. Now, I think there were a couple of home
Hmm.
run balls in there. I forget what the longest one was, but he had two of them.
70 yards.
So
70 yards. 70 and
so
like a 75
that
yarder.
puts him
It's
in the
crazy.
category with guys
Yep.
like Justin Jefferson or Jamar
Yes.
Chase or Nico
Yes.
Collins, who are capable of
Yep.
going on to the house 70 yards on one play, right?
Yep.
So that type of explosive talent at wide receiver costs, anywhere between 30 and $40 million a year, 25 to 35, almost as much as a quarterback, right? Um,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
and this is what we've become accustomed to. But both Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley are showing us that you can get that type of production from a star player, taking
Yeah.
advantage of this imbalance in the defense, as we've been talking about, and produce numbers akin to someone like Jamar Chase or Jefferson for a
Mm.
fraction of the price. So I think we're going to start to see that. We talk about the theme of this show being the return of the running back. Get ready for it, man. Get ready for it.
Yeah.
That kid at Boise State right now, who for a while
Oh
looked like
yeah.
he might threaten Barry Sanders' annual record
Mm.
for his year totals, his career record totals for one season. I think it was like over 2,600
Ashton Gent-
yards at
Ashton
Oklahoma
Gently.
State. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he's got the
Ashton Gently.
NCAA record, I believe, for a season's total. And
Hmm.
so it was around 240 yards a game type of thing. It was just unworldly, right? And this kid's
Standard.
fallen off. He's fallen off the pace a little bit. He's not quite at 200 yards a game, so he won't threaten
Mm.
that record. But still, 2,000 plus yard runner for the season. He is going to
Mm.
be. If this kid doesn't go in the first round, like in the middle of the first round, I would be shocked. In fact, I'd be surprised if he doesn't go in the top 10, usually where a prolific wide receiver coming out of college might go in the draft.
Oh
Because
yes.
NFL general managers are starting to recognize just exactly how much damage you can do with a good running back like Saquon. And they're not
Mm.
everywhere. Not everyone can do it. But we've
Of
seen
course.
throughout the league how many running backs have produced this year. Maybe not at the
Oh
same
yeah.
level as Saquon and Derrick Henry or Bijan and them, but
Mm.
like you're seeing way down through the ranks that trend being replicated. So you're seeing a lot of other players. Again, like look at Rico Dowdle the other night, put up 20 fantasy points. Guy put up
Oh yeah.
100 yards, and just they kept pounding him the rock, right? So that type of old school running game is what's for dinner again, buddy. It's on the menu.
I'm telling you right now, man, it's on the menu, and we're going to see a very great matchup this afternoon or evening. For some of you guys listening, where we're gonna have Derrick Henry, who is, battling with Saquon for the rushing title. And the
Yeah.
thing is, what Derrick Henry did specifically against the Chargers is he shut the game down. When they kept running him in the fourth quarter, the
Yep.
linebackers, the corners, they couldn't take it. And I'm talking about a Chargers team which is known to stop the run.
Yep.
But they
Yep.
could not stop Derrick Henry at
Well.
24 carries. That's what we talked about, 20 or more,
Yep.
140 yards. And that opened it up for even Justice Hill. Because Justice
Yep.
Hill got a crazy long run at the end of the game because Justice Hill was getting open gap to run. And I'm
They
telling
were
y'all
able
right
to
now,
do it. They were
yeah,
able to do against the Chargers what they were not able to do against the Steelers, which is a very similar
exactly.
defense according to the numbers. But it looks like the
Exactly.
Steelers D is a little better.
Steelers D is actually good, and you know what? Steelers D is an anomaly because y'all have the personnel. In other words, y'all have the guys, the big boys who are really, really hitting for real. But let me tell you something, man. This pairing of a good to great running back with a very good to low key dual threat quarterback, I think that
Hmm.
is something that teams should look out for. I really like your take about Gently, who went for
Yeah.
2,288 yards this entire season, balling out of control.
And,
The Dallas Cowboys, if they don't re-sign Rico, they got to look at this guy. A lot of teams have to look at this guy for a potential huge draft pick of their
why
own
wouldn't
top
they sign?
20
Why
guy.
wouldn't they re-sign Rico Dowdle? My goodness, he looked great the other day.
Oh,
But yeah, like it'll be
crazy.
interesting. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. How big is? What are they saying there? He's what's his size?
He's
What's he showing there?
he's kind of a smaller guy. He's a 5'9", 216, almost like a Emmett Smith type of build in a sense,
Right.
right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
No. Cool. Cool. Yeah. No. Well, it
Mm.
shouldn't be a problem against those undersized middle linebackers.
That's a fact. That's actually that's a major fact. Shouldn't be a problem
Yeah.
at all. And other than that, like we're talking about here, is looking at the league and projecting what's going to happen in the future, man. This is time, and we're going to talk about this a bit later when we talk about our OT. So y'all stay tuned for OT. But we got to
Yeah.
talk about some lines and spreads, bro. Lines and spreads for week 13, man. We're getting close to the end of the season, man. We're
Yeah,
getting
man.
close to the end of the season. Lines and spreads for week number 13. How does it looking on? What are some lines and spreads you want us to focus on? You know what I mean, this week, brother.
Well, the first one I've got asterisk is this Tennessee at
Right.
Washington game.
Tennessee,
My
Washington.
numbers,
Let's look at them.
my numbers tell me that this should be a slam dunk for the Washington Commanders to cover
Okay.
5.5 points. But
Mm,
their points for and points against tells me that a point spread is as much as 10, 11, 12 points could be appropriate in this game. So why isn't
okay.
it? Right? So why isn't it?
Mm,
Right?
mm.
Because Tennessee's quiet as it's kept, Tennessee's defense is a little bit better than its offense.
Yes, it
But their
is.
offense has actually shown some ability of late.
Mm,
Will Levis hasn't been quite as mistake prone, and they've managed to score more points than you would normally think. I think they put up 30 points last weekend, or over 30 points. So
yeah, they
that's
put
unusual.
32 versus the Titans, versus the Texans. They beat the Texans. By
That's
the
right.
way, CJ Stroud putting it down on Orlovsky running in the end
Big
zone
old,
for a
big
safety.
old
It was bad.
big old upset right there, right? So
Huge.
again, when we talk about the back end of the season and regressions and whatnot, right? So
Oh,
Tennessee's been a little bit worse than we imagined they would be, and they've been horrible against the spread. So to me, 5.5 points isn't really a huge number to
mm,
cover, but I just have a gut feeling on this one. I really like. I'm ignoring my own model on this one and calling for Tennessee to cover that spread. Just given how
mm,
the Commanders have played
okay.
a little bit of late, who knows? Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
Commanders get back on track again to their 40 points a game type of stats against Tennessee. But I'm calling for an upset here. A road dog
Oh,
upset here. Yeah, yeah. So that's why that pick
okay.
is asterisk and notable. And I'm also taking
Okay.
the under on this. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly, messy game where Tennessee perhaps dominates on defense enough that they can get within that 5.5 point spread.
I'm going to agree with you. Right now, it's looking they're given a 6 point spread, so it
It's
moved
at
a little
six
bit.
now. Okay.
Yeah, it's six now, but
Even easier.
44 and yeah, even easy. I'm taking it too, man. I'm
Right.
taking it,
Because,
and I take the under as well because Washington is in free fall right now.
yeah, think
They're
about it, right? I
underperforming, and
mean,
I think Brian Robinson's injured too. Their running back. I think
at
he's a
one
little
point
hurt.
they were 7-2 against the spread, and now they're
Mm,
7-4-1 against the spread. The Commanders are. So
wow,
that just sort of tells me
wow,
there's a bit of a shift going on. And
yeah,
especially at 6 points, like I could see the Commanders winning, right? Because they've been having a good season. But
of
at
course.
6 points, I think I could see the Titans getting underneath that.
Oh, 100%. Titans are a tough out, especially with what I saw versus Houston. That was a huge game for them, huge divisional matchup for them.
It's
But
this time of the year where it gets messy, man.
it gets real messy. How is this Pittsburgh Cincy looking, man? I know you have that penciled in. It's looking three
Yeah.
points. They're giving three to Cincy. Pittsburgh over under 46. I'm already taking the over. I already know what time it is.
So yeah, yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, unsurprisingly, I did very little analysis for this game because, of course, yeah, my pick is Pittsburgh to cover those 3 points, win the game, all that type of stuff. Um,
Mm.
if that happens, guaranteed it'll be under those 46 points, right? So,
Oh, you're going
but
under. Okay, okay, okay. Interesting. Okay.
yeah, well,
Mm,
because that's the only way
okay.
Pittsburgh wins is if they defang Joe Burrow and company, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's impossible for Burrow and them to put up 41 points and the Steelers still pull out the win. That's just not how the Steelers win this year. Right.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah. So I have it. Both teams are reasonable against the spread. Pittsburgh's awesome. They're 8-3 against the spread, but
Okay.
Cincinnati, for all their troubles, are still 6-5 against the spread. right? Because they put up so many points. So yeah, 46.5 is the over under. I mean, who knows? Cincinnati might score that on their own if somehow Pittsburgh takes the day off on defense. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Pittsburgh wins this game. Hope, probably like 23-20, something like that. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe it ends up being a push, but actually no, because since he's favored, right? Since he's favored by 3. So yeah,
Since he's favored by 3, they're
yeah,
favored
if
by
Pittsburgh
3.
wins that 23-20, that's an easy cover. But
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
yeah, I don't see if Cincinnati wins this game, like the bottom of Cincy, like Pittsburgh would have to take the day off, and I think they did one of those just
Yeah.
recently against Cleveland, so I don't see it against Pittsburgh here.
It's gonna be
Against
very interesting.
Cincinnati.
It's gonna
Yeah,
be very interesting to watch because you have a divisional game late in the season. Bengals, this is pretty much the season. You know, they lose this
they're
game, it's
desperate.
over, like borderline mathematically done. It could go either way. One thing's for sure, this game I think is going to be very close. By the way, I want to give a big shout out to Sleepy Euphoria for sending us that $2.79 super chat. He was doing cardio while listening to us. That's how dedicated he is. So shout out to Sleepy. I appreciate you. And any fan who wants to show us some love with some super chats, feel free to send that. We put in a lot of work. We put in a lot of
Yeah,
dedication. This
man.
is season 3, 3 seasons, y'all, that we've
Yeah,
been doing
dude.
this, and I'm so proud of where we've come, and I'm so proud of what we're doing, and I'm so proud of the community. We've started a community, low key, of
Yeah,
people who are
man.
dedicated
For real.
watchers, and we are so thankful for y'all. And we have some announcements coming soon, so y'all better watch out. You know what I mean?
Now, just as a
Yeah.
side note,
Mm.
Kareem says he does that all the time too, man. He'll listen to the rebroadcast while he's working out.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
he streams it sometimes after the live event is finished, and he'll get the rebroadcast on that while he's working out. So he does the same thing.
Yeah.
So super shout out to you, Sleepy Euphoria. You're in good
Let's
company.
go. Shout out to Kareem as well, man. Appreciate your watching us on the replay, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
dude.
Look,
Big
you what?
supporter. Big supporter. He says he
Oh, we
gets
love
most of
that.
his football news from us.
Oh man, he probably winning a few fantasy games because of us, man. Come on now.
He's do he's doing better than he did last year.
There we go. There we go. That you know who's doing way better than well, they're doing way worse again. I think this is upset territory, brother. Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. If there's something you can pencil in as an upset, man, Houston is in extreme free fall. I'm taking Jacksonville to cover, bro. And you know what? I might even take the over because that Houston defense is so sink and swim. They got Houston by 3.5, and they got 44.5 points, bro. Man, Houston free fall. Jacksonville on upset alert. Unc, what do you think?
I think Trevor Lawrence is playing this week too.
He's back. Yep.
Yeah, so that's certainly a rational prediction. The numbers say that any point spread in the Texans' favor up to like double digits is valid, right? Just like I said with the DC game. But again, yeah, the Texans look like they're just, it's just not quite there for them in the way that we'd like. Now, the point spread's 3.5. So again, that's an awkward number, right? So Jacksonville losing this game by 3 points sounds about right. Probably like 47-44 or something crazy. To be honest, I'm actually praying for that because then Nico Collins would probably be blowing up. But yeah, I've got Jacksonville also has been surprisingly 6-5 against the spread for a team whose record is what, like 3-7 or 4-7 or something, really terrible.
Horrible.
Jacksonville surprisingly 6-5 against the spread. So go figure.
Wow.
So, and at 3.5, that's a tempting number, but I'm going to go with the Texans here. The Texans are actually 5-6-1 against the spread. So the Texans are not like, spread conquerors at all. When they win, it's usually they're underperforming. To have a winning record and to be 5-6-1 against the spread means that you're not winning by as much as people think you are. So that's a sign of underperformance. Nevertheless, I'm going to stick with the Texans, and I'm going to take the over in that. I'm assuming it's going to be a kind of a wild AFC South game, as late in the season, as these games often are. But I'm going to stick with the Texans to hang on and win this and to cover that spread.
Nice, nice, nice. Y'all be paying attention to what Unc is saying, man. His record has been steadily rising with his lines and spreads, and he's
Mhm.
giving out knowledge, man. This is free game. Yeah, you know what I mean? This is free game. What do you think about this? Is an interesting matchup for me. You know what I mean? Because it's not necessarily the season, but it matters because we're inching closer to a narrative. And what is that narrative? The narrative is that Aaron Rodgers might get cut by the Jets or might leave the Jets. And I'm telling you, this game will tell us a lot. And somehow the Seahawks are leading their
Yeah,
division. They got the Jets -1, so they're saying this is going to be a very tight game.
yeah.
Over
I, I've
41 and a
I've
half.
got
How
the
do you feel
Jets.
about
I've got the Jets on upset alert. I mean, it would
it?
hardly be an upset
Ooh,
at this point, right? Um,
okay, okay, go
at
ahead.
the same time, Seattle's game is picking up, right? Everybody's getting healthy again. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Seattle just kicks the shit out of New York in front of their hometown fans, probably like 24-3 or something like that. So it's probably why the
Yeah.
under number is so low. But yeah, I would take Seattle confidently to win that game, cover that point spread. And the over under, that's a really fascinating question, right? Because how many points can the Jets get? And Seattle's not that prolific, right? So I would take the under on that, right? Because I bet you the Jets don't score more than 10 points.
And the craziest part about this is that you know what they just did to Daniel Jones, meaning they cut him in order to save some money, something like that. Those contract thing. There's a bubbling rumor they might do that to Aaron. So there's a rumor.
It,
There's a
it,
door. After
it's
this
well,
game, the door opens higher. That's all I'm
Well,
saying.
when your quarterbacks are signed for 40 freaking $1 million a year, and like
Yeah.
the cap figure or whatever it is, if you get injured, the guaranteed figure if you're injured is like a substantial portion of that. Well, heck yeah, man. That's just
Yeah.
simply called risk management. That's risk mitigation. And
That's
especially
fact.
with a 41-year-old quarterback who's been looking brittle all year.
And he's ruined your entire. Oh, I don't know what's going on. I'm back. I was in the dark, but now I'm in the light.
You good now?
We
You good
we
now?
got to talk. Look at me now. You know what I mean? But let's look at something. This is game of the week, y'all.
Yeah,
I
dude.
don't
This
think we gotta hesitate. This
this
is
one
game of the
is
week.
this one's a
Oh,
handicapper's nightmare, man.
let's talk about it, Unc. We got the Ravens favored by 3. I believe this is M&T Bank Stadium. Philly's
Yep.
coming to us, and we got 50.5 in terms of our over under. Unc, what are your thoughts?
And this is a low key rivalry game too, man, because they're geographic
Mm,
rivals. They don't play each other that often, right? But
never.
they are. They're just up and down the pike. So there should be lots of fans from both franchises at this game. It's going to be insane. Um,
Birds, bird
so
gang.
now, yeah, it is. That's right. Ravens and the Eagles, man, should be interesting. Now, okay, so Philly is on a bit of a hot streak of late, as we've
Yes, sir.
documented as far as Saquon is concerned. But also, too, remember they started the season out what 2-2. They're
Nice.
now what nine
No,
and two, I think, and they're 7-4
seven-game
against
winning
the
streak.
spread.
No.
Pardon me.
They're on like a 7-game winning streak, something insane
Yeah,
like that. They haven't lost in like months.
and
Mm,
they're at 7-4 against the spread, so that's pretty reliable. Baltimore's
yeah.
disappointed a little bit where the spread is concerned, although their record is respectable. They're 6-5-1 against the spread, and they're
Okay.
favored by 3 points, as you indicate, at home. And my numbers say that Philadelphia should be the favorite in this game by 2 3 points. So with Baltimore being favored at home, I guess that's the bookmakers giving them the sort of the built-in home field advantage. But they're basically saying that this game is essentially a pick-em. Now, much like when we were
Mm,
handicapping the game against the Steelers and Baltimore, we just
okay.
indicated that the only real weakness between the two teams, and it applies here again, is on the defense. Those Baltimore corners, but Baltimore's actually looked a little bit more spry on defense, just as far as the eye test is concerned in the last couple of games. So all is
Okay.
not lost where Baltimore is concerned. Nevertheless, I shall be picking Philadelphia to cover that spread. I'm taking the over
Oh,
because I expect a lot of points. I expect both teams to score in the 30s. I
yeah.
expect
Me
this
too.
game to be a barn burner on Monday night. like fantastic, outstanding entertainment value in this game. But I've got Philly covering this. They may not
Mm.
win the game, but I've got Philly covering that 3-point spread, and I'm taking the over, as I said.
Nice, nice, nice. You already
And
know what
that's
I'm gonna say. I'm biased as hell, but I think
that's that.
in
Sorry,
terms
pardon me.
of the
That's the
line,
afternoon. That's the afternoon window,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, it's
4:25.
4:25. Yeah,
My apologies.
it
Sorry,
should
I
have
was
been
thinking they
flexed.
had that on Monday night again. My bad.
It's all good. They should have been flexed in all honesty to make it prime
But
time. That's what they should
sorry,
have
yeah,
done. That's all good.
you were in the middle of giving me your Homer take. So please carry on.
Yeah, yes, for sure. You know me, I'm a homer, man. I already got my Ravens winning, but I will agree with Unc. I believe it'll be covered. Meaning, in other words, this is going to be a 1 point game. This is going to be a Justin Tucker either field goal miss or make. Because he can miss them, man. Let's be real. He can miss them this year. I don't know what's going on. I believe the game is going to be in the 30s. And guess what? I think it's going to matter about
Oh, dude,
cornerback
it's
play.
coming down to the two. It's
Cornerback
going to be
play.
a 2-minute warning drive. Question is, which
Yes.
team?
Which team? Could it be the Eagles coming out with Jalen Hurts? I think AJ Brown is going to have a huge game, and that could lead to a
Yeah,
conversation about fantasy. The
yeah,
corners, if Devontae's playing, you better start Devontae. You better any receiver from the
yep,
Eagles is liable to torch the Ravens secondary. But also, let me say this. The Eagles have sometimes been caught slipping as well. So even though their
yep.
defense was playing great this season, they are liable to get caught slipping. Any more lines and spreads you want to touch on, brother, or how you feeling, bro?
Well, just to say that watch the weather in Buffalo. Right, they're talking about a lot of snow. They're favored by
Yeah.
6 in that game. And I think San Francisco's turning into a dumpster fire. So like bet Buffalo confidently, even with the weather, and maybe take the under in that game too for the same reason, also the weather. And then the Cleveland Denver game, don't get it twisted, man. Denver's 9-3 against the spread. They're playing at home, favored by 6. Don't even look back, man. Just take Denver in that game. The over under is 42, which is curiously small for two offenses that have shown an ability to operate. I expect Jameis to be throwing it all over the field trying to catch up, but I think it's going to lead to errors against the Denver D. So take Denver confidently, 6 points at home and the over. So that's it.
Love it. I love it, man. I already love it. But we gotta also get in our fantasy bag. And I started fantasy with saying that y'all better if you have AJ Brown, he is going to absolutely destroy the Ravens. That's my lock for the starts and sits. Obviously, you're probably already gonna start him, but Devontae Smith is gonna have a big one. Who would I sit? Kyron Williams, man. Kyron Williams, I think he's
Interesting.
basically and I'm telling you right now, that offense it might be surprising, but that offense actually, because of all the Puka Nakua coming back and Cooper Rush coming back, if you have another option, Kyron Williams should maybe sit down a little bit. He has
And
not been producing to the level that he usually is. Those are my locks for starts and sits.
and
What are your thoughts? What are your
And
opinions?
it actually, the Kyron situation, I noticed that too. The Kyron situation is interesting for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that he's got a fantastic matchup against New Orleans today. But
Oh,
the reality is that since the return of Puka Nacua and Cooper Cup, all the offense is going through them. All the offense is going through them, and they're even starting to finally pull out Blake Corum a little bit to get some sample size on him. So I'm not sure whether they're resting Kyron or what is going on there exactly, or whether they think maybe Blake Corum gives them a little bit more spring. Maybe they feel Kyron's getting a little bit worn down. He's had a lot of volume early on in the season, but the reality is that all the defense, all the offense is running through Cooper Cup and Puka Nacua right now. So yeah, it would be a brave move to sit him unless you've got a couple other outstanding backs, because the potential for Kyron is always high. But yes, he has been a disappointment for the last, basically since those two receivers came back.
right,
But
right. That's why I would start him. If you have no other option, then obviously start him. But sit him if you have
yeah,
somebody in the
but
back
but
end
temper your
to fill a role.
expectations. That would be valid advice. But for
Yeah.
me, now here's the situation. Fantasy is actually quite interesting. There haven't actually
Mm.
been a ton of injuries this year.
Yes.
I think bye
That's right.
weeks have been far worse for fantasy managers than actual injuries to star players, with a
Mhm.
few notable exceptions, of course. But so all I'm saying this for is just to tell you that there's actually not a ton of people on waivers that are just obvious to pick up that people have just sort of ignored and whatnot. It hasn't been a wild carousel of speculation because there hasn't been nearly as many prominent injuries to prominent players in fantasy this year. So I'm going to give you, and especially also, this is a week I believe there's no bye weeks and whatnot, so it's everybody's
All
good to
buys.
go. Everybody's good to go, right? So I'm just going to give you like your red and green light kind of start in this situation. And if I think there's somebody on waivers that might could help you, I'll let you know, right? But for
Mm.
quarterback, anyways, so yeah, Hurts is looking at a great matchup. Mahomes has got a great matchup. Baker Mayfield and Herbert. People who have less enticing matchups are Lamar, Burrows, Jaden Daniels, and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray has got it. He's up against it today in Minnesota. On
Right.
the waiver wire now, this is Anthony Richardson week. If you've been
Oh,
waiting to
gotta
play
start him.
Anthony Richardson again after his return from purgatory, um,
Yes.
like Anthony Richardson going up against, I think it's New England. Like this is the week to play him if you picked him up because the rest of his schedule is terrible, and I think he has a bye week next week or something crazy. So
Oh, he
this is the
does.
week to play Anthony Richardson if if you need a speculative play. Also,
Mm.
Gino T Law and Gino Anthony Richardson's counterpart May. Drake May has a good matchup
Drake May.
against Indianapolis. Yeah, they're top 10. They're a green light matchup in fantasy against quarterbacks for the season.
Right.
For running back, good matchups include Run CMC, especially if it
Mm.
snows a lot. You're looking at a ground and pound game most likely.
Right.
Kamara has a good matchup. Joe Mixon he might have the best matchup of the week going up against
Oh yeah.
Jacksonville.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Williams actually, like I said, has a good matchup. Aaron Jones against Arizona, probably another good matchup.
Oh,
And
that's
Chuba
real
Hubbard
good.
in Carolina, man. Lest we forget that Carolina is another franchise that looks like it's regressing to the positive.
Yes.
Bryce Young looks like he's had like that sitting down for a bit. Looks like it's been good for him.
Good.
Like that game against KC last week was magic.
He should have
Yeah,
won.
Carolina's starting to look viable. Now, so those are some now some matchups that are less than enticing, but you're still going to be playing the guys, right? Henry and Bijan have tough matchups. Saquon's got a tough matchup. Brian Robinson, I think, is actually out. So
He
McNichols is
is
the
out.
pickup there. They're saying McNichols for the DC Commanders will probably get most of the touches there. Gus
Mm.
Edwards also for the Chargers. DK Dobbins is on injury reserve. He's out. So this is your chance to pick up Gus Edwards. Doesn't get many receiving yards, but he's going to get all the red zone work and
Yes, sir.
most of the carries. Yeah. Now for wide receiver, very good matchups for Nico Collins. Fingers crossed. God damn. As you mentioned, AJ Brown is looking
Yeah.
at a very good matchup. Nakua and Cup, of course. Now Sutton. Sutton is looking very good. He looks like he's become the primo alpha receiver in Denver ever since he had that inexplicable shutout game. So the wide receiver gets ticked off after that, and now it regresses to the positive. And now Sutton is just devastating week to week to week. Very, very favorable, and a favorable matchup against Cleveland, who's been mailing it in on defense for about 6 weeks now. Now, bad matchups for pardon me. Good matchups also for McConkey and probably for Judy in Cleveland, just because Winston's going to be throwing it around so much. Who knows?
Mm.
Judy could end up being his number one receiver because Tillman is out, right? Tillman's out for this
Almost
week,
out of here. Yeah, he is.
right?
Mhm.
So, so bad matchups are for Chase, but you're going to be playing him anyways. McLaurin, still playing him.
Yeah, probably.
Now, Evans versus Carolina. Carolina is actually surprisingly pretty good against wide receiver, but you're still playing Evans too, obviously, right? Now, on waivers, there's not much, man. Pittman, Addison. In fact, the best place to pick up receivers if you need a receiver for whatever reason is probably the Carolina receiving room. Leggett,
Yes.
Thielen, Conquer, like all those guys are widely available through fantasy. But like the way Carolina's playing, you might be surprised at the production you get out of one or any of those guys, right?
Leggett is
Now,
really good at end zone receiver, man.
damn
Bryce
right he
loves
is.
him in the end zone. So if you really want somebody last minute, Leggett is a great find. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm telling you. Now, tight end, everybody's pretty much good to go. Tight end has had a nice little bounce back, basically since tight end day, and so pretty much everybody's good to go there. I don't think there's too many prominent injuries. Check in on Goddard, see if he's healthy. Njoku is the only one with a really challenging matchup. I'm really like unsure about that. So and Pittman's going up against the Chargers. That's not a great one. But Njoku, I mean, how do you sit him, right? Unless you've got like a fantastic alternative, it's hard to sit him. I've got Cade Otton going against Carolina, right? But since Mike Evans has returned, Cade Otton's cooled off a little bit. So I'm going to be flipping a coin until like 12:55 or whenever kickoff is, trying to figure out who to play on that one. But either one is probably going to be good.
I think like you said, Mike Williams is back, so he's gonna get less targets. But I'd still go with Cade Otton, man. I'd start him personally,
It's
but
such a
that's up to you
juicy
if you're picking.
matchup. It's
Ooh,
such a juicy matchup against Carolina.
great matchup.
Defenses that are looking like they have a good day. As I said, Seattle defense against the Jets. LA Rams against New Orleans, the LA Chargers versus Atlanta. That's probably going to be a good matchup.
Hmm.
The Commanders versus the Titans. The Titans actually give up the most points to defenses. Now, that's a product of a lot of Levis's interceptions. So we'll
Right.
see how that plays out. And DC defense is available in about 65% of leagues. So if you want to stream, and the other one is Denver's defense and Indy's defense could also be viable today. Pretty confident about Denver. Denver, not guaranteed on Indy, but Indy's playing New England. So take that for what
And
it is.
low
But yeah,
score. Yeah.
so that's the world of fantasy. That's how it looks in
Oh,
fantasy right now, brother.
we're getting to the home stretch, people. Playoffs starting in about 2 weeks, or is it 2 or 3 weeks in most leagues? It's close, regardless of that.
Most
Yeah.
most leagues will conclude week 14, and they usually have
Okay.
weeks 15, 16, and 17. Our league, because it's a 10-team league with just a simple Final Four format, our
Mhm.
playoffs are week 16 and 17. Week 18, no league really operates because it's just so wildly undependable. It's inappropriate for a
Yeah.
championship weekend. So fantasy managers vis-a-vis your schedules, like just look down your bench, like pay attention to who has the best matchups. That often is a real indicator. Now, we're not talking about your core players, the guys
Yeah.
who
Of
got you
course.
this far in the season. If you're making your fantasy playoffs, stick with the guys who got you here. Some people are literally matchup proof. It doesn't matter how good the defense is against a guy like Jamar Chase. You're playing him anyways, right? But there
Mhm.
are maybe some more borderline players, your flex players, maybe your tight ends. If you got two or three of those, your defenses definitely. Pay close
Mhm.
attention to the schedules and who has green light matchups, especially with defenses. It is so disappointing to see your team give you
Oh,
-5 points because they got blown out. Your defense got blown out or something like that. Like, definitely look for your reliable performers at certain positions and look at your green light matchups in your flex positions.
definitely. And my advice to any one of y'all, if you have seen 2 or 3 consistent weeks of disappointing performances from any player other than your locks, feel free to drop him. Feel free to
Yep.
drop the defense and move on, man. Do not
Yeah.
hold on
Don't be
to that
emotional.
performance they had early season. Nope. If he is not producing in the last few weeks of the season, drop him. Drop him, switch it
Well,
out, waiver wire, find a solution.
most
Because you're going into
most
the playoffs, you
fantasy
better be ready. Hmm.
Most fantasy platforms, if you have any questions about just exactly how reliable some players are right now, most fantasy platforms give you the ability to monitor not only the season totals, but also usually like the last 4 weeks. It's sometimes valuable to check how a player has done in the last month versus how they've done on the year. And again, we're talking about, players that, you have questions about that are, maybe a little iffy, right? So take a look at that, man. Check out the last month and see whether they're indicating up or, down or up, right? So which way are they going, right? Which way are they trending? And sometimes it's consistent. Other times there's a significant difference, and it's worth paying attention to.
Absolutely, man. And that's grown man wisdom from a fantasy expert right there, man. And
Been
we
at
gotta
this a
go with the
long time.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we gotta get that wisdom about our OT segment. Everybody better perk your ears up. I think this is the most fun segment to cover and everything like that. And we gotta go old school because we're talking about the return of the running back. And there's two runners I really wanted to focus on for this week. And it's Mr. Jerry Curl over here, man. Mr. Rushing title leader. You know what I mean? Mr. Eric Dickerson and a bit of Walter Payton or Walter Payton. These are two distinct
Yeah.
different runners who impacted the 80s and even the position in general.
Yeah.
What is the story of some of these guys? Mm.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because these two running backs operated in the same space. Now, Walter Payton had a 5 or 6 year head start on maybe more on Eric Dickerson. He was a little bit older. He was in college in the early 70s. He got drafted by the Bears. Walter Payton got drafted around 74. Dickerson, on the other hand, got drafted in 83. So it's a 9 or 10 year difference between the two. But we'll start with Dickerson, right? Because Dickerson has got the season's rushing total. He's got the record. Was it 2,105 yards? That's the standard. And it broke O.J. Simpson's record of 2,003 yards that was established in, I think it was 72. Now, ultimately, Simpson did that in 14 games. The thing that's notable about Dickerson is that he actually broke that record in 15 games. So some people like to throw shade at Dickerson and say, yeah, but he had like 16 games to do it. And that is true, right? OJ ran at a clip of 144 yards a game, around 6 yards a carry. And Dickerson ran at 133 yards a game and about 5.6 yards a carry. Outstanding numbers by any metric or measure. But OJ is ultimately the better season, right, as far as efficiency metrics go. Now it's also era dependent, right? That was before they loosened up things for wide receivers. So would he have got that many yards if it wasn't, for that situation, if they weren't playing in Buffalo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's an interesting debate. Now, the difference between our two guys here is actually slimmer than you think. Both of them had seasons that mirrored each other, that both sort of threatened the OJ paradigm. In fact, in 1977, Walter Payton had a season of 14 games. Now, it wasn't as good as OJ, but it was certainly the second best season anybody had ever seen from a running back. Running back. He ran for, I think it was like 1,852 yards, Payton did. But that was also at a 5.6 yards per carry clip. And that mirrors exactly Eric Dickerson's number. So I guess the question to me is like, if Walter Payton had a 15th game that season in 1977, that was the last year of the 14-game season. If he had that season, a 15th or 16th game, would he have replicated Dickerson's number? And I think he would have, because they both played at a clip of I think Payton's clip per game clip in that season was 132 point something, and Dickerson ran at 133. So they both had remarkably similar seasons, right? So yeah, there's an argument to be made that Payton's 1977 season was as good as Dickerson's record-setting season in 1984, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, so as different as they might be in other regards, they were very similar. Now, where they're very different is their view of life and in the game. Sweetness, Walter Payton, I mean, there's debate about where that name came from. I mean, after a while, people sort of described it as, the way he ran was sweet, right? Wasn't sweet
Wow.
for the linebacker taking a hit, but sweetness actually came from his personality, a bit of a ladies' man, all that type of thing, right? So that's where that nickname came from. But after a while, it applied to his running as well. But he was a very open, very giving, very loyal person. He was kind of like, a mix of the old school and then the post free agency eras, right? So he kind of got lost a little bit in that free agency era once it sort of came and the type of player it produced. But Eric Dickerson saw it coming. Eric Dickerson was called a diva. Eric Dickerson received a lot of criticism despite his magnificent play because because he demanded to be paid, or requested politely, I think would be a better way to put it, to be paid, because he held out. The early era, the late 70s, early 80s, was not a really kind era to players that wanted to get paid. And the owners knew it. And they kind of toyed and played with Dickerson and made him kind of feel like they treated him a bit like a child in LA.
Wow. Wow.
Refusing to assess to his commands, or requests, I should say, his demands. They were of the mindset that that's just ridiculous. A running back doesn't get paid as high as a quarterback or anything of that nature. He's being selfish, demanding to be the number one paid running back, even though he was the best running back in the league. So all that criticism, in my opinion, is extremely unfair. The guy is simply taking a look at the marketplace, looking around, saying, like, look, man, my two first seasons, I gave you almost 4,000, over 4,000 yards running, almost 4,000 yards running, and crazy amount of touchdowns and whatnot. Who's doing more? I'm the most valuable player on the team. Pay me as such. And this is not like nowadays in free agency. Nobody thinks twice about it now, right? If a player holds out or holds in or anything like that, nowadays usually we end up blaming management for mismanagement of the payroll. Right? Nowadays, our sensibilities are far more sensitive to the star players, and nobody would have an issue with Dickerson's demands back then. But management held all the leverage, and they treated him as such. So, I mean, think about it. It's a grown-ass man, 25 years old, driving attendance, all that type of stuff, and they're all just like chuckling to themselves, going like, we don't really have to do all that. So anyways, he eventually forces a trade, which finds him in Indianapolis, which reunites him with his first coach at SMU, a man named Myers. And so they treat him like gold. And for the first couple of years, the trade is wonderful. It works out great. But of course, Indianapolis' problem is that they had this star player, but they were losing team. They were a losing team, and so Myers eventually gets fired. It's 1989. They're doing terrible as a franchise. So everybody points their fingers at Dickerson because he's the next highest guy in line. This is the guy that made salary demands after he got a new contract and whatnot. He started to complain, saying that, like, guys, this is freaking ridiculous, man. You're asking me to produce all these numbers behind a terrible offensive line. I'm risking my body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, he's very outspoken. And the fans are in a bit of a time warp. The fans they haven't really adjusted their sensibilities. They always blame the player, not the franchise, because they were all used to a free agency era where players were kind of the property of the team, basically. And so, of course, there were long tenures and loyalty, and a lot of players that just sort of knuckled under and accepted it and felt blessed just to be able to do this for a living instead of like driving a construction truck or whatever, right? So it was a very different era, and the fans were used to a certain type of loyalty. But Dickerson was at the edge of a new era, and he was saying, look, I'm the most valuable person here. Just pay me as such. And they were like, hell no. And the fans turned on him and all that type of thing. So he kind of retired early, did a couple of stints for both the Raiders and then for the Falcons before just saying, you know what, I'm done with this. Because through all these argumentations, through all these arguments in the press. Right. One time he called out Robinson, the coach in L.A.,
Damn.
because he was the highest paid guy. He was paid more than any of the players. And
Mm.
Dickerson actually said in the papers, like, make him run 47 gap, which is like their main run play, right? Get him out there. He's not, the lineman.
Yeah.
He gets paid more than any of the players on the team, right? Get him
Wow.
out here, right? And the fans took all this the absolute wrong way. And so, anyways, Dickerson had a bit of a reputation of being a diva, but he
Mm.
was kind of cold and calculating when it came to that. And he was, a
Right.
man from a small Texas town. He showed a
Mm.
remarkable amount of sophistication and and values coming from that small place to really challenge the big boys at their own game. And he paid a price
Oh,
for it. He's again one of these, the best player to never win a ring and all that stuff. And it never bothered him. Didn't really care,
no.
right? He was always looking forward. And the last thing he wanted to be was anybody's sucker. So, and he
Right.
wasn't. And so, but unfortunately, the fans loved him when he was great, but they were very quick to turn on him when he wasn't. Right. The opposite occurred with Walter Payton. Right. Walter Payton
Right.
wanted to be loved, and he was loved because he gave back love. Right. He's just like he had
Yeah.
this sort of he had an almost naivete about
Mm.
how the world wasn't that Dickerson absolutely did not have, right? So
Oh.
Sweetness,
Oh.
throughout all his dominance, he would be hurt because of that trusting naivete that he had, and would happen a couple of different
Right.
times. The first time that he really got hurt by the game was in the Super Bowl, when you see he had put in all this work through the 70s and early 80s when the Chicago Bears were absolutely a terrible team.
Mm.
Ditka came along and turned it around. They drafted well. They worked on their defense. Buddy Ryan created that incredible defense. And so things really turned around in Chicago relatively quickly. And Peyton was there for that. But the thing is, this is also the post-strike. We're getting into the free agency era. And guys like Jim McMahon, William Perry, the Fridge, right? These are all big TV personalities that were getting all this attention. But yet, here's Sweetness, who is sweet, who's humble, who's from a different era, really, when it comes to celebration and demanding the attention. But he still had that demand. He still wanted to be loved, right? Big time. And
Wow.
he started to feel like he was kind of being ignored on this team with all the media attention. Well, all of that
Oh.
came to a head in the Super Bowl, right? As you'll remember, the Chicago Bears beat the New England Patriots in 1986, January 86, in New Orleans,
Oh.
46-10, right? So absolutely dominant performance. Not uncommon in that Super Bowl era of the 80s. There were a lot of blowouts, right? So that game was over at halftime. So
Right.
I will forgive them for not feeding Sweetness, for not feeding Walter Payton, ensuring he got a touchdown in the first half, right? They were just making sure that the game was sewn up. But in the
Right.
second half, Ditka calls it his biggest regret, but he also makes a lot of excuses. I, for one, will
Oh.
never forgive Mike Ditka for that. Right? There were a
Mm.
lot of occasions. There were a lot of occasions where Walter Payton was getting the ball, in the red zone from the 10-yard. So it's not like Payton was having, a super great game to begin with. But you got to be kidding me. In a 46-10 blowout, you can't at least like manufacture an opportunity on the 1-yard line where you guarantee that Peyton gets his touchdown or something like that. I'm sorry. It's just you do that, right? And now there's some people that will sit there and go say, oh, it's a bunch of whining, it's a bunch of crying, this and that. Game was what it was. Dick didn't see a need to do it. And why does he care about? Come on, man. Like human beings are different than that, right? Like this is
Right.
your friend. In some ways, this is your friend. This has been the loyal soldier who's been toiling away in obscurity for all these years. He's had fame in later years, right? But it's only because of all the hard work he'd done in previous years. Like, come on, man. Like, I will never forgive Ditka for that, man. In fact, I mispronounced his name a little bit just to show you how I feel. I transposed the letters a little bit, man. So yeah, I was super disappointed with that. But the other disappointment he got was Walter Payton wanted to be an owner. And he felt with all the
Right.
currency and love that he had, that he would be a wonderful face of the organization. Same how Michael Jordan wanted to do the same thing.
Yes.
Um, but like Peyton was absolutely devastated. It killed him to find out that he
Oh,
wasn't really accepted at the owners' table, and in fact that they
wow.
gave a franchise to Jacksonville, which did have minority ownership. They chose another person besides him. Chances are
Wow.
it was because of money or financial statements, but Walter Payton really thought that the NFL not owed him, but would see him as a positive asset and would want him on an ownership team. But with those Sharks, they didn't care about none of that equity. They didn't care about that. So his heart was broken by the NFL on two occasions at the
Wow.
end of his career. And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the story of his post-career life, but he got a liver disease. Walter Payton did. It was very
Wow.
sad. He died a young man, younger than I am now, I believe, and it was really quite unfortunate. He left behind a son and a family who were, very beautiful family, and he just left the world way too soon. And in fact, again, like it's remarkable the continuity in Chicago. Just as Walter Payton was sort of like a Sayers throwback, Bronco Nagurski, like the monsters of the Midway type of classic Chicago running back, there was also something called a movie called Brian's Story, which was about Brian Piccolo and Gale Sayers. And Brian Piccolo got cancer,
Mm.
and Gale Sayers was his backfield mate, who was also his best friend, and they made a movie about it. It's a very touching movie, and everyone thinks of this relationship between the two men as being a very beautiful thing. But it happened again in Chicago between Walter Payton's fullback Suey, who got a touchdown, by the way, in that Super Bowl, who was his
Wow.
fullback. And the two of them had a very beautiful relationship, familial relationship. Suey was godfather to Peyton's son. I mean, it really was Bang the Drum Slowly Part 2 with those two because Suey stood by his side right to his death. So you could have made a movie out of it. And who knows, one day maybe they will make a Bang the Drum Slowly 2.0. But it was
Mm.
very touching. Um, that's why the Man of the Year award, I believe in the NFL, is called the Walter Payton Award, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So Walter Payton got a lot of flowers and a lot of love in the retrospect, but when he
Wow.
deserved it in the moment, the NFL let him down, unfortunately. But
Wow.
there's no deny he. Let's not overlook a couple other basic bullet points to talk about Walter Payton. He also he finally broke. He was the one who finally broke Jim Brown's record for career rushing yards. Yeah, that record stood for almost 20 years. In
Wow.
fact, I believe it did stand for 20 years plus. So
Mhm.
that's very significant. So that was celebrated. That was huge. And that stood until Emmett Smith finally broke it. But, a lot of people say that was done with volume as
Mhm.
opposed to yards
True.
per carry, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
Walter Payton is by any measure a Hall of Famer. He is in the Hall of Fame. He's a Super
Mhm.
Bowl winner. He's a league MVP. He was a rushing yards leader. I mean, he basically ticked almost all of the boxes.
Mhm.
So both players represented an era of running that was kind of a little bit absent of that. Like to find someone
Oh.
who could solidly put up 5.5 yards per carry for an
Wow.
entire season, even if it was just for one season, that's historic. To find someone who could put up 350 to 400 carries and still maintain 5.6 yards a carry, that is absolutely unique. Now, we're seeing
Mhm.
some guys this year threaten that a little bit, right? Saquon
Right.
is his. I'm pretty sure he had both him and Henry. I'm pretty sure are up near 5 yards a carry. So that's
Yeah.
special, right? But not as special as those two guys. Boy, they were unique.
They definitely were, man. And that's why I wanted to compare the two because, you know what I mean? Walter was more of the shifty, you know what I mean, left right type of running back. And Eric Dickerson was more north south, you know what I mean?
Let me
So
tell
those
you about
two
that.
contrasting styles. are just so interesting to me in terms of
Well,
running. You know what I
actually,
mean?
that's very true. That's very true
Mm-hmm.
because the one thing that's different about Eric Dickerson, and there haven't been many like him, but the tall,
Right.
erect, upright runner
Yep.
is a bit of an anomaly in the NFL because yeah, the
Yes.
best NFL running backs are actually about usually around 5'10" and 220 with big ham
Yes.
hocks for thighs, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
usually got a fat ass and a narrow chest. It's true because they have to swivel like a gyroscope, right? So they have
Yep.
to be really shifty up top with their upper body and they have to slip through little corners and whatnot, but they got to have like a bulldozer set of thighs pushing
Like
them
this guy.
forward. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, well, the best example of it is Marshall Falk. If
Yes,
you've ever
Marshall
seen
Falk.
a picture of Marshall Falk without his shirt on, the fucking guy looks like Tom Brady without his shirt. He looks like he's got no place in the NFL. It's all in the thighs and the ass, right? They
Yep.
often have a very pear shaped body. So Dickerson was different from that because he ran up erect. And he said himself, like, don't get it twisted, right? People say that I
Mm-hmm.
run erect, but that's only after I've broken free. Look
Yes.
closely at the at my positioning before contact. My shoulder pads are down,
Mm,
and both him
mm,
and Peyton had that in common. They love to hit. Walter Payton
yeah.
actually said it out loud a couple times. He goes, "No way, man." He goes, "I see the linebacker. I want to be the guy who hits him first. I want to hit the
Right.
linebacker, not the other way around." Right? So, yeah, they're
Super
again
cool.
unique,
Very
right?
unique, and that's what the beauty of the sport of football, because you have all types of body types, like you just said. I just Googled Marshall Fox. He looks like a 50-year-old dad who just came
At
out
32.
from watching at third. You know what I mean? And bro was a monster on the football field. So you
Yep.
have all types of unique body types, all types of ways to win. And I just always I liked all I watched Eric Dickerson more so like as an
Yeah.
analyst. I haven't watched a lot of his highlights, but dude was fast, he was strong, and I've seen a lot of Walter Payton
Yeah.
highlights, and he was very, very talented as well. But I just like the contrast in styles. That's why I wanted to bring
Well,
it up.
one of the things that
Super, super,
see
super, super. It's super cool to me. You know what I mean? As
one
a
of the
fan.
things about Dickerson, one of the reasons, the other reasons that he got criticism, because there are some people that like they run with such a natural gift, right? They look like track athletes, especially a tall guy like him. He probably could have run track, right? They make
Definitely.
hard work look easy. Even
Yes.
though they're
Yes.
working at top speed, they look so effortless in doing it. Some people get it twisted.
Get it straight up twisted, and that's why I always look at it like football is such an interesting game because all types of styles can make it work. And
Yeah,
when
man.
you look at the past, it sometimes repeats itself. That's why I named this the return of the running back. We're
Because
seeing
it is a return.
amazing.
What is happening this
Yeah.
season is absolutely unique, and I love it.
Mm-mm. I absolutely love it too. By the way, we got one more question in the chat. I think Ryan came a bit late. Should Jets blow it up? This is our last question to end the podcast. Do you think the Jets should blow it up, Unc? I have some interesting thoughts on the back end. What do you think, Unc?
Well, why not? I mean, why
Mm,
not? Like seriously, like this is obviously a huge complete failure. I would sell off the parts
yes,
as quickly as possible. Where do you find a buyer though for for what's his face there?
already,
But Garrett Wilson would get you some talent,
oh
right?
yes, oh yes.
Yeah. Like I would just blow the whole thing up and start at the bottom, man. Starting with a coach, maybe rehire
Mm.
Robert Sala.
You know the
um,
crazy part? I think Robert Sala is working with Green Bay, so Robert Sala is closer to a ring than the
yeah,
Jets, man. And the Jets have missed the playoffs, brother. They have the longest drought, like 12 years, 12 close to
yeah.
13
No,
years.
man. Woody Johnson has no idea what he's doing. So yeah, the Jets are a perennial rebuild every single year.
And you know what? With the Trump presidency, Woody might be going to England, and his brother
Probably the
might come
best
in.
thing that could happen to the Jets.
I'm saying I'm actually in full agreement with Unc. We're at the point where we need to get these owners who have no knowledge of football, who just go where the breeze goes to tells them or
Yeah,
follows,
man.
a 41-year-old quarterback who's a narcissistic, delusional guy. So we need to stop that. So I say blow it up, get a coach who's competent,
Yeah.
maybe try to lure Bill, Belichick, that is. But I think
Nah,
Bill will probably
man.
say, hell
That
no.
is the wrong
Bill,
way to go. That is the wrong way to go, in my opinion. I would
look,
do.
man.
I would get like a coach like Salah, whoever he is out there right now, and also a
Mm,
a professional general manager. And I would just
mm,
blow the whole thing up. That is a top-down rebuild. That is not a
mm,
bottom-up rebuild. That is a top-down. Start at the top. Maybe after building from the top on down, maybe you go down to the bottom and build up. But that thing has to
mm.
start in the GM's office. Yep,
Starts in the
that their
GM
rebuild
office.
starts there.
There we go. We're gonna find out tonight, man. Thank you so much, Unc, for the time. We thank you so much, people, for being in
Always
the
my
chat.
pleasure.
Appreciate y'all and people watching on the replay. Like, comment, subscribe, share with everybody. We out.
All right, one love, guys.
Yes, and